All right. Hello and welcome to Critical Conversations. I am your host, Karissa Dean, and today I am really excited to talk about something that's coming up frequently with clients. It's also been a personal theme, probably for like the last 6 months, maybe longer, but definitely like really hot and heavy in the last like month. And that topic is relationships. And I want to start off by saying, we're not just talking about intimate relationships or friendships or relationships with family. We're talking about our relationships to everything around us. So this would be things like our money, our time, our consumables. So like what we're eating, and also like what are we reading? What are we watching? What are we listening to? So it really is encompassing all five senses, as well as the connections we're making in how we would normally think of relationships. So I want to start off by talking about the self, because I think we bypass this a lot, and bypass is a huge buzzword that I'm using right now, and I really want you to catch on to it in the regard that when I say bypassing, I mean that you're glazing over, you're kind of skipping over, you're like covering it and saying, oh, not right now. And I think we need to stop doing that as a society. You know, this is the moment in time where I think we're like coming out of a COVID hangover. I think that we are waking up to the impacts of social media. I think that we're waking up to understanding that life can be done differently, and that we need to stop and we need to really get clear and connected. And so we have spent so much time ignoring the inner pings and calls and desires, and we have made our lives be about the should. Oh, I should be doing this, or the have to. So I have to do this. And what I really want you to ground in today in this conversation is we have to start somewhere, and we have to start small. And I'm suggesting through this conversation that it all starts with you. And I think this is why my tagline has been and will continue to be for the unforeseen future: choose you. Because I think at the end of the day, the relationships we're having, the conversations we're having, our connections, it's all about the other thing, right? So even if we just pause and we, look at money, we should be doing things for money, or we have to do things for money. But if we stopped and we said, wait, I'm going to choose myself first. How do I want to make money? What does money mean to me? What does wealth mean to me? What does, how do I want to bring money into my world? How do I want to use money? What's my relationship to money? It really does all start with you. And these are the things that we have to get curious about, because when we go through our life, we are learning constantly. So we are born and brought into this world, and we're being conditioned from day one. The way that I use money 10 years ago is very similar to how my parents taught me to use money. And it was never a conversation, right? My mom never sat down with me and was like, this is how you put money into your wallet. But like, she didn't put money into her wallet nicely. She didn't respect it. And so there were these subtle things about money that I've had to relearn. And I had to relearn them because I had to choose my path of what do I want my relationship with money to look like. So really, we're talking about all these things. It can be money, it can be food, it can be your cell phone, it can be your husband, it can be your mom, it can be your grandma, it can be your child, it can be your dog, for goodness sake, your cat, your turtle. I don't care. Insert the thing that is coming up for you right now. What is your hot topic? One of the number one topics that I talk about with clients is money. And I also talk a lot about time. One of the first realizations or breakthroughs I had around time was it's actually not It's not even your relationship to time. It's your relationship to yourself through your prioritization. So time is abundant, right? Like time there, it's always coming and going. Like I'm looking at my countdown here of my recording, like, it's 10, 12, right? It just keeps going. There, it is limitless. It is endless. There is no end to time. Yet we're constantly putting this restriction on, I don't have enough time. And the reality of that is if you were choosing yourself, if you got really curious about who am I, how do I want to spend my time, you likely would have time for the things that you're saying currently, I don't have time for. I don't have time to read. I don't have time to take a bath. So I always take a shower because I'm always in a hurry. I don't have time to slow down and make myself a nourishing meal in the morning. So I just grab a bar and go. I don't have time. But it's actually all about your priorities. I don't have time because I have to go do this thing for so-and-so. I don't have time because I should do the dishes in my sink. And this is one of the major pain points, in my coaching practice and what I work with clients on. What are your priorities? Like, what is the weight that you're giving it? And so really, when we're talking about relationships, we're talking about the weight that we're giving it. We all have parents. Whether we have a relationship with our parents is based on the weight we give that relationship. Same thing with our partners, so it's kind of like if you just stack up all these empty cups, right? You stack up all these empty cups and, the cups are representations of not only how you spend your time, but the value that you're giving to things, right? The value. Well, I have to have a good relationship with so-and-so because that is what I learned when I was a child growing up. That's the most important thing, right? Okay, so I'll just use myself as an example to help kind of drill this home. And I'm going to bounce around a little bit, but I think what I want you to pay attention to is the themes and how you can insert your theme. So like right now, the theme of my life is my relationships with my family. So I grew up and it was like my grandma called my mom every day without a doubt. Like they didn't have anything to talk about every day, but every day my grandma called. And my mom sometimes, not always, but sometimes was annoyed. What do you want, mother? Is how she would answer the phone, right? She's already irritated. And so it became this like, I should answer the phone or I have to answer the phone, right? And I think if my mom had gotten really curious about what's the relationship she wants to have, not the obligation, but like, what is it that I want this relationship to look like? I think when the phone did ring, she probably would have more time and space and compassion for the connection on the other line of the phone. And so when I look at, when my mom calls, I don't have that same, I have to, because I've gotten really clear about when I'm available. And this is the piece, when we have all these empty glasses on our counter and we're looking at the value and the weight of what we are putting in, there's a level that is matched in my cup that is my relationship with my mom, where I'm not willing to just answer the phone out of obligation. When I answer the phone and I talk to my mom, I want to be available for the conversation. I want to be sacred and safe in my body. I want to be feeling really good because it's important to me to show up in a compassionate capacity for my mom because we do have a strained relationship. So if I'm just answering the phone out of obligation, I am putting stress on that relationship and on that conversation. And I don't want that. That's not what I want for my mom. That's not what I want for me. So I think it's looking at this glass and being like, what is it for me? What is it for me? And, I'm really excited. Next week, the podcast coming out is an episode with Grace Lamore. And she is a mental health therapist, and she and I get deep on this, and we talk a little bit more about this. And I love, when I am coming up with like, what are the podcasts I'm recording? What are the things I'm doing? What am I talking about? It's interesting because I'm batching, I'm scheduling, I'm being more organized, because I'm prioritizing certain things, right? I'm paying attention to what works for me. I've got really curious about, wow, okay, if I sit down and I map this all out, it actually goes a lot better. And I love it because God and divine intervention is like, actually, you're meant to record a podcast episode on relationships. And then it just so happens that the podcast following that is a conversation that I just had with Grace. And I'm just like, I love the divinity of it. So if you're not following, make sure you do follow, and like, so that you don't miss that release. But back to relationships, it's the weight that you're going to put on it. And it's the boundaries to which are necessary so that you don't lose yourself, so that you can continue to choose yourself, so that you are more clear on who you are, and less out of obligation, less out of I should do or I have to. And this is something really fun that Grace and I talked a little bit about, is about creating new beliefs. And this is the piece of the relationship strain that I'm feeling is I am changing beliefs. I'm changing my way of being. I've decided that my life gets to look differently, that I'm not going to feel obligated to do anything. I'm actually going to get so curious about who I am, what I'm creating, what I'm available for, the type of experience I want to have in this life. And because I've taken the time to get curious about that, I now have standards, I have boundaries. And so when it comes to these relationships, the relationship with my mom in particular, it's so important for me to be calm and stable when I connect with her. And part of the strain is because I'm changing and she doesn't see the value in the change, because this is the way it's always been. This is the way it's always going to be. And there's a block for her around the expansion of what's possible, right? She hasn't tapped into that growth and expansion. She has been living a certain way, doing certain things, like this is how it goes. And there's no room for exploration. And I think as a society, this is kind of what's breaking down and killing us. And I think this is what's killing our teens, and even, people of all ages, because we are ultimately losing the relationship to ourselves because we're killing ourselves out of obligation based on the things that we're ingesting, right? So if we interconnect the previous topic of the five senses, right? You are a product of what you see, what you smell, what you taste, what you touch, which is feeling, right? Like feeling, which there are so many scientific studies about, like hugs, like how hugs and an 8-second hug can radically change. Like it does. I'm not a scientist, and I I haven't sat down and looked at the data, so I don't know how to explain it otherwise than like, go give somebody an 8-second hug and feel it. You'll feel the shift. And that's something I talk a lot about with my clients, and it's something that we practice a lot in our house, where like, whatever we're going through, sometimes we just call it out. I need an 8-second hug. I do it all the time to my husband. Yesterday, I was like in my feels. It's eclipse season. There's like shit going on. I'm like figuring out this relationship with my mom. And I literally just looked at him and I was like, do you have time for an 8-second hug? And like, of course, he like set down his phone, he set down everything. And it's like that. And that is all I needed, right? To get back connected, right? Because it brings a sense of like, for me, it's like an exhale. Okay. So we are a product of our five senses. I got stuck on feeling. So let me go back through because I don't want to miss anything. But whatever you're smelling, tasting, touching, which is the feeling, seeing, and hearing, right? So we are a product of these five things. And there are conscious things that we're choosing. And then there are unconscious things, right? So like the way that we were raised, the environments we lived in, the things that people said to us, the things that we saw, the things that we felt indirectly or directly have a great impact on the way in which we choose to have a relationship with ourselves. And so the concept here, why I'm talking about relationships, is you have to start with yourself. You have to know who you are, because otherwise those five senses, these old beliefs, these conscious and unconscious, these chosen and unchosen pathways will rule your life. And we get lost in the noise and the sea of what everyone else around us is doing. And this is what, Grace and I expand on the episode that's coming out next week, where it's really about, if I know who I am, then the noise, it's always going to have a little bit of an impact on you. And this is the fun part of the conversation about talking to somebody who's licensed and has studied it. It's always going to have a little impact on you, but there's awareness to it. So we all know social media isn't real, right? It's a small glimpse of what happens in somebody's life. Like I'm constantly like, what do I share with my audience? Because there's so fucking much in my day. Like I can't even keep up with myself. I don't know how you keep up with, I don't even know what I do half the time. So how am I supposed to keep you guys engaged, right? And so there's this piece of like, but if we know ourselves, all this noise that we're ingesting unconsciously, right? We all unconsciously scroll at some point or another, what we're listening to, whether it's the news, whether it's podcasts on true crime or, whatever, you're constantly putting in noise. And so the concept here is if you want to have better relationship without, right, in the external world, if you want to have a fruitful marriage, if you want to have a fruitful relationship with your family, with your friends, you have to get more curious about who am I? Because otherwise you are conditionally living and you are becoming those around you, right? So this is like, when I started my personal development journey, when I got into coaching, when I decided to become a coach, when I went through yoga teacher training, I can't even tell you all the things that I've done, but it's like, as I continue to learn and grow, the more I read, the more I realize it's really less about all of that. And it's more about, who am I? Who do I want to be? And my private space, because if you can get super clear about who you are in your private space, right? Like if I can find joy in my private space inside with my relationship to myself, it is going to be easier for me to have joy in my external world, in my relationships. It will be easier for me to find joy on social media. It'll be easier for me to find joy with my money, with my time, with my work. But it's all about cultivating from the self first. And I think this is where our society has gone ass backwards. And what we are going to witness if we don't course correct and start to draw more awareness to this and have more conversations around this, we are going to see a lot more depression than, it's going to be catastrophic levels of anxiety, depression, and suicide, and serious mental health issues, because we're going to constantly be bypassing the relationship to ourselves. And what happens when we bypass the relationship to ourselves, we start to feel like shit. We lose a sense of purpose. We lose a sense of joy and direction, right? We lose our sense of drive, because these are the moments where you wake up and you're like, well, what's the point? What's the point? And if we get to those states, it's a lot of work to come back from. It takes a lot of intentionality. And it's not easy work. It's not fun work. My coaching business isn't like flourishing because I think that it's a vulnerable place for people to come, because I need to know enough about what they currently believe so that I can change the pathway and we can create new beliefs together. It takes somebody being open to the growth, right? And so when I started my coaching business, I remember my parents thinking I was nuts. Well, why would somebody pay you to be vulnerable, like therapies for like deep trauma, right? Like if we're in an abusive situation or you're getting a divorce or something, right? That's what therapy is for. And there's no need for coaching because you just do the things that you've always done. And so I've had to battle this internal like heartbreak, right? From not feeling like I was believed in or that it was of value. And so my coaching business has suffered because I, for the last 6 months, have been in this mind fuck around, well, maybe they're right. Maybe they're right. Maybe this is the wrong industry for me because people don't want to pay for growth and they don't want me to help them hold up the mirror and they don't want to create new pathways. And they don't want me to tell them, okay, you need to also go to therapy because you got to feel that shit. And that's not like, I don't do that. And so I had to get quiet. And so the last 6 months, it's like, I wasn't taking on any new clients. I wasn't doing anything. I was really just focusing on like, who is Karissa? Who is Karissa? And what is the relationship that I want to have with myself? What is my dharma? What is my purpose? What is it that I am here to do and create and have and hold? And I can't sit here and tell you, oh, my coaching business is the only thing. It's not. I'm so many things, but I will say that it is something that if you ask me to give up on it, that feels like a death sentence. And so what I know to be true now, because I've chosen myself and I've chosen this relationship to myself first, I know that there's a reason I'm here. And that I started this podcast and that I do have clients who are very happy and living better lives because of it, doing more fulfilling work because of it. So when you meet yourself, you get to look at the parts of your life that are working, right? There are so many beautiful parts of my life, other businesses. My property management business is flourishing. My trucking business is in a complete pivot and upheaval. And I don't, it's like I get to set all those things that are outside of me down and I get to know myself. And when I look at what I'm doing here, the work that I have been, really it feels like a soul calling, like a destiny, like, I'm a disciple. I'm a disciple of whatever you want to call it. I'm going to call it God because that's what I believe. I'm here and I have to speak and I have to share and I can't give up because somebody else has a belief that's outdated and doesn't work for me. And so this is why people struggle in relationships because we believe it has to be a certain way. And so what I want you to understand is that it doesn't need to be any way but your way. And that is why I think, coaching is so valuable. It's why I won't give up on it. It's not about, making a bunch of money. I had a new client call this morning and, she's like talking to me about how she wants to do it, but, money's tight. Business is rough. Things are down. Like, look at the economy. Like, the world is a dumpster fire right now. Like, and so I just said, okay, what can you afford? And I'm going to work for her at that rate because I really believe that this is the work I'm meant to do. So if I'm trusting that inner conversation, that inner dialogue of this is who I am, this is the work I'm meant to do, then why wouldn't I trust that conversation, right? And why wouldn't I trust that if I accept, money can continue to flow for me? Like, this is the power of the work that we do, is because we get to know ourselves. We get to change our relationships. I'm changing my relationship with myself first. And then all my external relationships get to change. My work gets to change. My money gets to change. The way that money works for me. If I really hold the belief as an independent, quiet being that money is always flowing, then I don't care what you can pay me. Pay me what you can. And I trust that the universe will bring me someone else that can pay me a little bit more than what you can. you have to know who you are and you have to drown out the noise. And, I've really struggled. Like, by the way, this is not where I thought this podcast was going, but I've really struggled in being in the coaching industry. And I've had moments where I really hate it. And I've always loved it, because what it did for me is it opened my eyes. It gave me this mirror. It gave me the power to change my beliefs. It gave me the power to choose a new pathway. But I can't sit here and lie to you and tell you that it hasn't been filled with a lot of noise about how I need to charge $5,000 a month for somebody to get on a phone call with me once a week. Like, Jesus Christ, like that is, like that doesn't feel good to me, and I've participated in it. And, for the people who are doing that, like, good on you. And I'm glad that, like, that truth resonates for you. But for me, it doesn't resonate. It's not working. It's not working, which is why my coaching business isn't, doing as good as my property management business or as good as anything else. It's not because I don't have the business structure or systems. Those are all there. But I was doing it based on the noise, not based on what I am here to do. The work that I am here to put forth into the world. It's not about me getting rich. I am rich. I have everything I want. All my needs are met. What I want now is impact. What I want now is to inspire you to understand that you can think differently. You can choose a new pathway. You can get to know yourself. You can pivot and recreate at any moment. And it's so fucking beautiful when you choose that. It's hard. Really hard. There's been a lot of tears. There's been a lot of doubt. There's been a lot of, what am I doing? How do I do this? Why am I doing this? But I'm worth it is why and how. The who, what, where, when, why is because you're worth it. Because it's not about, anything except for knowing yourself, loving yourself, trusting yourself. And you can't get there with old beliefs. You can't get there from trauma. You can't get there by bypassing all the things. You get there by looking at who you are, by sitting down and getting curious about who am I? Who am I? Not as a wife, not as a mother, not as a pet owner, not as an equestrian, not as a dancer, not as somebody who's made a shit pile of mistakes, who's burnt bridges and ruined relationships, or even had, meaningful relationships, powerful relationships, who've coached, hundreds of children, who've taught people how to dance, and now they're dancing in New York City. Like, it's not about that. It's who am I? And if I am love and I am joy, then everything that I do is love and enjoy. And this is what, I want to bring forth into the world. These are the conversations I want to have more about. I think that if your business is suffering, you got to look at you first. What choices are you making? A year ago, my husband's business had this big upheaval, and it was like, he numbed for a while. He ignored it for a while. And the moment he fucking got curious about who am I? What do I actually want to do? What's the work I want to bring forth? Everything changed for him. When he finally sat down and was like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, what is the goal here? What am I creating, and how do I want to create it? And what does that look like? And he stopped, ingesting all the noise. His business has been flourishing. And so, I'm a real believer on, like, what you are is what you create. And so if what you're experiencing in your external world isn't what you want, then you have to look at the self. So everything in life is a relationship, but it all starts with you. And if you can't get curious about yourself right now, that's okay. That might not be your path. Your path might just be here to have fun. And high five on you, man. May you cheers one for all of us. But if there's a ping in you, a desire for it to be a little bit sweeter, if there's a ping in you where you're like, man, a little bit more joy would, like, really be, that would feel good. If there's a ping in you of curiosity, like, I beg of you to just get quiet and get more curious about that ping. Like, what is that ping? What's working? What's not working? And I think that It doesn't have to be through coaching. I really believe in therapy. I really believe in us looking at our traumas and not bypassing these difficult things, the things that happen to us. If it's religion, and you can be a good person, I think that's the most important thing at the end of the day. But if it's coaching, I would love to have that conversation with you, because ultimately, I think coaching should be approachable for people. And I think the industry has become very loud and noisy, and it's become unapproachable because there's this hierarchy, which is great. It's great for the people all in who buy into it. I just hope that they're doing it authentically and truthfully and from from who they are, not from who their coach told them they needed to be. So I think there's a responsibility in all of this to call out authenticity, to call out truth, to call out trust. And I want you to get curious about what that is for you, because that's what I've been working on. That's what I've been deep diving. I think there's a lot of things I would have said and done differently, even a week ago. I really want to hold space for people to love themselves. And I think that starts by getting to know yourself. And that is the relationship to yourself. That's finding your truth. That's finding your voice. That's being authentic to the you inside that isn't the inside of all the conditioning, all the things that happen to you, all the noise, all the old beliefs. You can pivot, you can change, and it can get better. And it's just about getting curious about the relationship you want to have with yourself. So big podcast today. Wow. You're welcome. I'm not going to apologize for it because I think it's divinely guided. It always is. I have no notes in front of me. I have no nothing. I just knew that I was coming to talk about relationships, and mostly the relationship with yourself. But with that being said, please know that you do hold more power than you think. You have more options than you think. There's more opportunity for you than you think. And I would love for you to just take 5 minutes and sit down with yourself and get curious about that. Maybe it's through meditation. Maybe it's through journaling. Maybe it's a bath. Maybe it's yoga. Maybe it's a walk. But I would, offer that the more we could all sit with ourselves, I think the world as a collective improves and gets better. With that, I will leave it, and stay tuned for more conversations. Let me know what you think about this in the show notes. And if you're curious about coaching with me, please reach out on any social media platform or in the show below. You can drop a voice note. Let me know what you think, and make sure you are following, and subscribing. It is through all of those beautiful things that you do that help support entrepreneurs like myself do the work that we love. All right, y'all. Have a beautiful day. We'll see you on the next one.